Hey guys, it's Miss Herb again, here to talk to you a little bit about claims, evidence, and analysis in your body paragraphs, which will be due at the end of this week. So let's start out with defining what claims are. Okay, so claims, you can see right here, are statements made about your argument that someone could potentially argue against. So if someone came up to you and asked you why cheerleading is a sport, or why the justice system in the United States is corrupt, your response would be a claim statement. Okay, so let's look at what claims should be. They should be debatable statements that can be supported by evidence or research. Okay, so those outside sources you got from your resource collection, that's what's coming into play here. Okay, and claims should not be opinion statements. I think cheerleading is a sport because when I do cheerleading, it is really hard. That's not a good enough claim. Okay, and claims are also not statements of fact or something that everyone knows, like the sky is blue or grass is green. Right? Okay, so that's what claims are. Let's move on from claims into evidence. Now you guys should know this is probably just review, but evidence is researched information that helps to add validity to an argument. Okay, so it helps to prove your argument with outside sources. And I want you to hear me on this part right here. Without evidence, there cannot be a claim. Okay, so that's why these two things kind of go hand in hand. Claims flow right into the evidence, and the evidence needs to support the claim. Okay, and evidence is used to help persuade or convince your reader, which is me, that more than one person can make the argument you're making. Okay, it's kind of like a bandwagon, group mentality situation. Okay, you're trying to find as many outside sources that can help you to back up the claims you're making about your argument so that your argument and your claims seem legit. All right, so that's evidence. We have our claim first, then we move into our evidence, and I'm going to show you some examples of what evidence can be. So, evidence, as we know, is information from credible sources that helps to validate the claims you make about your argument. Okay, and so evidence can be one of four things. It can be up here, it can be quotes, direct quotes from your outside sources using quotation marks, parentheses, and citing the author's last name and the page number from the source. Evidence can also be paraphrases of quotes. Okay, and so in this case, you would not have to use quotation marks. You would just have to add a little citation, an in-text citation that includes parentheses, the author's last name, and the page number at the very end of the paraphrase that you have. And paraphrasing is just restating information that you find from an outside source into your own words. Okay, so you're taking someone's idea and you're restating it, but still giving them credit, without all the quotation marks and all the extra stuff that comes with including a direct quote. Evidence can also be statistics and data, and that might come into play with your quotes or your paraphrases. You might have some stats or data in these two different things. But statistics and data, as we know, it's pretty simple. It's just, numbers, years, estimates, all that kind of stuff. And last but not least, this kind of sums up everything that evidence is, but evidence is that factual information that you're not including in your claim. All right, let's move on from evidence into analysis. So once we have our claim, we move into our evidence, then we move from those two things right into our analysis. Okay, and let's do a little definition of analysis. An analysis is when you present your reasoning and you draw a conclusion about how your reasoning relates back to your claims. So when we're analyzing, we're answering two different questions. We're first answering how the evidence that you found, right, those quotes, those paraphrases, those stats and data, how that evidence relates back to the claim that you made, that debatable, researchable statement that you talked about. Okay, so we're answering how the evidence relates back to the claim. And second thing we're answering is why the evidence is actually important, or like why does it relate to your argument at all. Okay, so we're tying the claims and the evidence together with a nice pretty bow in the analysis. Okay, and so another way you can think of this is you're answering the question, what does your evidence mean, or why does it matter? Okay, so let's move on from our analysis. Here are some sentence starters that you can use to help you when you're brainstorming your analysis sentences. So starting up here, you could say something like, the fact that, and then you'd fill in your evidence, points to the fact that, and then you add your reasoning right here at the very end. Okay? This next one here, let's try this one. The conclusion of, right here is your reasoning, can be drawn from this evidence. And then you could fill in specifically what evidence that is right there. Moving down here, this, and then you can include the evidence in this blank, demonstrates that, and then you can include your reasoning here. It is clear, therefore, that, you add your reasoning right there. Here you're not referencing your evidence, you're just giving your analysis in that example right there. And then this one right here, this evidence is crucial to the claim that, then you state your claim, because it, then you state your reasoning as to why the evidence is crucial to supporting your claim. Okay? And last but not least down here, this evidence, whatever your evidence is, therefore implies, and then you add your reasoning or your analysis right there. Cool? All right, let's move on. So this is a little flow chart to remind you how claims, evidence, and analysis should be structured in your body paragraph outlines. Okay, so you're going to make a one-sentence claim about your argument. Okay, then you're going to move from your claim directly into your evidence. And your evidence needs to have some sort of introduction to it, okay? So I don't want to see any quotes that are thrown in there without something like, in a recent study conducted by the author's last name, right? We need to make sure that we have an introduction into the quotes that we're using. And then once we go from claim into evidence, then we go straight from evidence into analysis, okay? And analysis is tying up these two things with reasoning as to how and why they relate back to your argument. We're going to take a look at some examples here of claims, of evidence, and of analysis. And I want you guys to read through these claims. You're going to pause the screen, make sure that you can understand what's going on in the sentence. And then I'm going to ask you whether you think it is an example of a good claim or an example of a not so good claim or something that needs some work. Okay, so let's start right here with claim number 1. I'll read it for you. I think that gummies are delicious and should be put in every vending machine in the country. So you can go ahead and pause your screen, decide whether you think this is a good or a bad claim, and then we'll talk about why it is either good or bad. So this claim is actually ineffective, and I'll tell you why. It uses an I think statement, right? I think that gummies are delicious, and so that's our opinion statement. That should not be included in our claim. It also has a personal opinion that is attached to the I think statement, right? And then there's also not really any potential for this claim to be researchable, okay? So because it's an opinion statement, we can't really add any additional outside research on why gummies are delicious because you think they're delicious, but some other people may not think that. Okay, moving on to claim number 2, you can go ahead and pause. So this claim is saying gummies and other sugary processed foods consumed in large amounts can develop obesity in individuals. Let's see if that was a good or a bad claim. So that was a good claim because there was no I think or opinion statement, right? The first one we saw said, I think that gummies are delicious. Well, in this example, I don't see the word I in here anywhere, right? It's a general, it's a broad, overarching statement, and it's arguable, right? It's debatable. Someone could disagree with the fact that gummies and other sugary processed foods develop to obesity. Someone could say that, it's also fat foods, and it's also fast foods, and it's other things, not working out, and it's a variety of things. So that statement was arguable or debatable. And then there's also potential to use scientific evidence to support that claim, right? So we have the words like obesity and consumed in large amounts and processed foods. Those are all things that you can just know with common sense. You'll be able to find some scientific evidence to support. All right, let's move on to the next one here. Claim number 3 says, the sky is blue. So take a second, pause, and decide whether you think this is a good or a bad claim. So this is a bad claim, an example of a bad claim. And why is because it is a universally agreed upon truth. So remember how I said that claims cannot be something that everyone already knows. They need to be debatable. They need to be open for inquiry, right? So the sky is blue. Everybody knows that. I guess unless you're colorblind. But the sky generally is blue for the most part. Okay, so that is a universally agreed upon truth, just like the grass is green, or paper is white, or, things like that. Moving on, claim number 4. TikTok can become addictive and harmful to teens if the app is overused. So take a second, try and figure out if this is a good claim or a not so good claim. Okay, so this is an example of an effective claim, of a good claim, because there's no I think statement in there, and it's also a debatable statement. Okay, so someone could argue that, well, TikTok isn't actually addictive because, you can sit down and set yourself a time limit, and then you won't be on there for 2, 3, 4 hours, right? Or someone who doesn't even have TikTok will say, it's not harmful or addictive to me. Okay, and then you could also use scientific evidence to support this statement, right? So keywords like addictive and harmful and overused, okay? These are all things that could clue you in using your common sense that this could be researched. So that's what makes this an effective claim. So moving on, let's look at some examples of evidence and analysis. I'm going to tie these two together just to make this video a little bit shorter for you. But let's start by reading this. I'll read it to you. Today we are too self-centered. Families do not sit down to eat together, preferring instead to eat on the go while rushing to the next appointment. And this is the source. Now everything is about what we want. So take a second, decide if you think, based on what you know about evidence and analysis, if this is a good example of those two things. So this is an ineffective example. This is a bad example of the way that evidence and analysis should be tied together. So let's figure out why. First of all, what does the information about families not eating together have to do with being self-centered? Okay, we saw no reasoning, no connection between this first statement, that we're too self-centered, and this next statement, which is the evidence, right? The families don't sit down to eat together. We didn't see any connection between those two. There was no transition. That makes it ineffective. Yes, no connection or explanation. And also, this author used the word we, which is one of the key words that we do not use in our writing. Okay, so we don't use the word we, our, you, I. None of those things should be in your writing. Okay, let's move on to the next one. I'll read it to you. Today, Americans are too self-centered. Even families do not matter as much as they once did. In fact, evidence shows that most American families no longer eat together, preferring instead to eat on the go while rushing to the next appointment. There's the source. Sit-down meals are a time to share and connect with others. However, that connection has become less valued as families begin to prize individual activities over shared time, promoting self-centeredness over group identity. So let's take a second and determine if this is an example of good analysis or bad analysis. So this is an example of effective analysis. If that's what you said, you're right, because all of the elements that we've been talking about, right? The claim, the evidence, and the analysis, they're all connected and they flow together really well, right? So see these key words: in fact, even, right? However, there's transitions between the claim into the evidence and into the analysis. It's not abrupt and harsh like that first example was. Okay. There's also, at the very end, we'll take a look back at it, an analytical statement made about the evidence. So see right here, this semicolon, all of this. However, that connection has become less valued as families begin to prize individual activities. That is an analysis statement that is made about the evidence that families don't eat together anymore. So that is an example of an effective evidence and analysis statement. Last one, let's take a look at this one. To keep up with society standards, women go through expensive beauty regimes. In a recent study conducted by Bill Rossman, it was found that, here's our quote, the average woman spends over $200,000, that's a lot, on makeup in her lifetime, not including facial care products. There's our site. This is enough money to buy a house, notes Rossman. Are women so uncomfortable in their own skin that they would rather spend thousands of dollars on makeup rather than expose their potential flaws? So let's take a look and see if this is an example of good or bad. So this is an example of an effective argument. If that's what you said, you were correct. And why is because the claim, the evidence, and the analysis are all connected to each other and they flow together. So let's try and identify the claim. The claim right here is, to keep up with society standards, women go through expensive beauty regimes. Okay, then our evidence. In a recent study, great introduction, conducted by the author, Bill Rossman, it was found that the average woman spends over $200,000 on makeup in her lifetime. Then we jump down here. This is our analysis statement. Well, actually, it's a question. Are women so uncomfortable in their own skin that they would rather spend thousands of dollars on makeup rather than expose their potential flaws? So see how we're tying together the claim about society standards, women being uncomfortable in their own skin, and then we're tying together our evidence. They'd rather spend thousands of dollars on makeup rather than expose their potential flaws. That's the analysis. Okay, we're answering the why and the how. So that's why this is an effective statement. All right. We're going to call it a day, and you can check Google Classroom to see any other assignments.